Let's have a look at relative, absolute and mixed cell references. If you ever looked at the formulas in other people's spreadsheets and seen all those dollar signs everywhere, then this session is for you. And if you're writing your own Excel formulas, it's vital that you understand relative, absolute and mixed cell references. Let's find out why. If you've written any formulas in Excel, even simple ones, then you've used relative cell references. This is the default or normal way in which Excel refers to cells. Let's look at an example. Here's a list of some products, quantity sold, and the price for each of the products. And we can just do a simple formula to calculate the total value. Total value equals quantity in B3 multiplied by the price in C3. B3 times C3. They're relative cell references. If I fill down these formulas, I can see that whereas it started off as B3 times C3, down at the bottom it ends up as B8 multiplied by C8. So the column letters are the same obviously, but the row numbers have changed. That's because they're in a different place relative to where you started. The pattern is multiply the cell 2 to the left of me by the cell 1 to the left of me and give me the result. Let's look at another example. So this time I'll use AutoSum, and the keyboard shortcut for AutoSum is Alt equals. So that writes my little formula for me. The formula being equals sum B3 all the way through to B6. And I'm now going to fill this across. Okay, so as before, we start off with B3 to B6, but by the time we get to the other end, it's D3 to D6. So this time the row letters are the same, sorry, the row numbers are the same, but the column letters have changed. Let's look at another example. What I might want to do is link to this data from another worksheet. So if I go down to here and I've got a worksheet called link, which at the moment hasn't got anything on it. But what I'm going to do is link to a cell in my previous worksheet. So I'm going to go equals, click on the across worksheet. Let's click on A3, which is North region. So I've linked that cell, North region. Now if I double click on that cell, you can see it refers to it as the worksheet name. That's what the exclamation mark means. And then A3, which is a relative cell reference, which can work well for us because what I can do is fill down and fill across, and I've got my data. I can even pick up those and fill up. I've now got my complete data. So relative cell references works there as well. So that's relative cell references. They're great because you can move, copy and link your data in Excel and not have to worry about your formulas breaking. But sometimes the default relative cell references can actually work against you. Let's look at an example. So here's a price list. Same batch of products. This time we've got the cost of the costs to us for each of those products, and what we're going to do is mark them up to end up with the selling price. And I've got a standard markup here of 50%. So for the first cell, that's going to be very easy. It's just a question of equals C7, which has the price of the hard case, times the markup of 50%. So our markup's going to be about $33.30 something. And incidentally, the 50% is stored in Excel as 0.05. But if you write it as 50%, it's easier, but Excel will store it as 0.05. So 66.67 multiplied by 0.5 is $33.33. So that works fine. Let's now fill this down, relying on relative cell referencing, which is the default. Obviously, something's gone wrong here. So what's gone wrong? Well, let me just click on the first cell again, and that works. C7 multiplied by C4. But with relative cell referencing, what Excel is actually doing is storing that formula as a pattern. So it's actually saying multiply the cell 1 to the left of me by the cell 1 to the left and 1, 2, 3 up. And that's what it will carry on doing. So now if I have a look at this formula in D9 where I've got value, if I double click, you can see why. It's following the same pattern. It's multiplying the cell to the left of me, which is correct. That's what I want it to do. But then it's going 3 up and it's trying to multiply $17.33 by the word cost, which obviously is not going to work. So we need to do something to fix this. So what I'll do is let me get rid of all of this and start again. The first bit of the formula was fine, equals C7. And that will get updated as we fill down C8, C9, C10, etc. Multiplied by C4. But what I've got to do here is tell Excel that it must always take the markup, the 50% from C4, even if we fill down. I don't want it to change the cell reference C4. So this is where I put a $sign before the C and before the 4 to make it an absolute cell reference. Now I can type in the $signs manually, but the easiest way is via the shortcut, which is pressing F4. And what the F4 key does, right at the top of your keyboard, it writes the dollar signs in for you. So now let's see what happens when we click and drag down. That looks a lot better. So we started off as C7 multiplied by C4, and then we end up down here with C12. The row number's changed, that's good, multiplied by C4. So it's still taking the markup value from C4. That cell reference hasn't changed because it's an absolute cell reference. Now we can just add the cost to the markup. We can use normal relative cell references here, and then we can fill that down. So in the previous example that we started with, I linked to another worksheet. I could still do this in this case, but I'm just going to show what happens if you link to another workbook. So Control N to create another workbook, and I'll just use my Windows right arrow to put it on the right hand side there. And I'll zoom in. So what I can do is, in my new workbook, I can say equals. I can click once to activate the left-hand spreadsheet, and then click on B6, and then press enter. So I've linked to B6 in the other workbook. So note this is the link or the formula equals spreadsheets.xlsx, which is the workbook name, followed by the worksheet name in my workbook, which is price list, and then the cell reference. But note, when I've linked from a new workbook, it's actually defaulted to an absolute cell reference. So what that means is that I can't do what I did previously and fill down and across, so I get the same thing. But there's no reason why I shouldn't replace that absolute cell reference with a relative one. And then it would actually work. So far, we've looked at relative cell references and absolute cell references. With this knowledge, you could probably get away with creating most formulas in Excel. There is, however, a third category called mixed cell references. If you master these, you can save yourself a lot of time and effort. Relative cell references have no dollar signs. If you fill a formula down, the row numbers will change. And if you fill a formula across, the column letters will change. With absolute cell references, you have two dollar signs. If you fill a formula across or down, both the row number and the column letter in the cell reference will never change. With mixed cell references, you can mix it up. You can have a dollar sign before the column letter to fix or anchor the column, or you can have a dollar sign before the row number to fix a row. Let's look at an example. We'll return to the price list example, but we'll add a little bit of complexity. We'll add a discounted price block. So the idea here is we take the price in column E and then we discount it according to whether it's a VIP customer, a club customer, or a staff member. 5%, 7.5% and 10% respectively. So in F7, the formula's quite easy. I can say my discounted price is going to equal the starting price multiplied by 1 minus the discount. So in the brackets, it's going to evaluate the brackets first. F5 is 0.05. So 1 minus 0.05 is 0.95. So it'll multiply 100 by 0.95, $95. So that's correct. Now that's not going to work if I fill it down, because I have the same problem that I discussed before, and that's fairly obvious. If I fill across, it sort of looks like it might be working, but a bit dangerous to assume that, because if I double click on H7, see what it's doing. It's using the discount rate of 10%, which is correct, but the price, instead of using 100, it's using 87.88, which is the club price. So just a lot of nonsense. So let's get rid of those. We need to fix up this formula. We need to make it into a mixed cell reference. Okay. If you look at, so E7 refers to the price and the F5 refers to the discount. E7 the price, F5 the discount. Now the price, you can see, is always in column E. It's in different rows, but it's always in column E. Whereas the discount is always in row 5, but it can be in different columns. Price is always in column E. Discount is always in row 5. So what we need to do is adjust our cell references. So I'll click in E7, and when we pressed F4 before, it put $signs before both the column letter and the row number. But you'll notice that if you keep pressing F4, it actually toggles. It starts with a relative cell reference, then it goes to an absolute cell reference, and then it goes to a $sign before the 7, and then finally a $sign before the E, and then back to the beginning. So there's 4 possible options. So we start with E7, press once, twice, 3 times. I put a $sign before the E because I need to tell Excel that don't mess with my E, because price is always in column E. Whereas in F5, I'll click in there, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I missed one. That's better. Second one. Here I've got my $sign before the 5, because I'm telling Excel that you must always take the discount from row 5. Don't mess with my row 5. That is a formula using mixed cell references, and now I can fill it down and I can fill it across, and I get the correct answers. Let's just double check the one at the bottom right hand corner. That's good. It's using $5.99, the last price, and it's taking off 10% to give us a discounted price of $5.39 for staff. So there we have it. Relative, absolute, and mixed cell references. I'm sure you'll find these very useful.